Stan, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me again, brother.
It's always good to see you, and I would love for this conversation to focus on what somebody can do if they're looking to lose those last few pounds. If they're looking at themselves in the mirror and they're like, you know what, like I've lost some weight, I'm getting stronger, but I can't see my abs. I don't have the definition that I want. So if you're working with somebody and they're coming to you with that issue, what's the first step you have them take?
Well, I mean, obviously they're already on a diet. If they're down to the last few pounds and they've been doing something right, they're eating less and moving more. Uh, the hard thing is that each, as you get leaner and leaner, it takes longer and longer, and you have to be more and more consistent and disciplined about those two things, the energy intake and the energy expenditure. It's really easy for a guy at 35% body fat to get down to 30% body fat. You just make some minor adjustments. But a guy at 15 or at 12 who wants to get to 10, now, the 80-20 principle doesn't work anymore. Now you got to be like 98-2 in terms of your consistency and discipline in your calorie deficit. And you have to increase your energy expenditure. And if you want to see your abs, obviously we've got weight training incorporated into that program, certainly long before this point. And you're going to have to continue to train at a very high level. What I've found as I diet bodybuilders and physique figure bikini people for competition up to and including all the way at the Olympia level, uh, as your calories get lower and lower, you have less and less energy to train. We need to keep the intensity up. Your volume will be compromised. You won't be able to go in and do 16 sets for chest anymore. It's just not going to happen with that limited calories. At some point, you'll have reduced your carbohydrates as well. But the intensity should stay high. And by that, I mean you should try and lift nearly the same weight for the same reps. When that starts to significantly decline, you're going to see a loss of lean muscle tissue. And so we'll pour more energy into the intensity and less into the volume. We might do fewer sets, but the sets we do will be much more intense. And we'll probably take a little longer rest periods if necessary, because it seems that the substrates that you're burning through for those intense sets may need a little longer to restore. And by that, I mean oxygen debt, creatine phosphate storage, just your central nervous system. Those things need to replenish. And so my rest periods start to climb a little bit when we get into that stage. I also like to split the workouts. You find that you can't train hard for a full hour, or certainly not for an hour and 20 minutes. And so I'll come in the morning and do legs, and that'll be a 40-minute workout. And I'll come back at night, or come in the morning, do quads, come back at night, and I'll do hamstrings, and that'll be a 25-minute workout. I'm also not a huge fan at that point of doing too much cardio. I know there's a lot of consternation over the interference effect and how it doesn't really necessarily impact lifters as much as we used to presume. But when you get closer and closer to your goal, there comes a point at which there is an adaptation that you're trying not to interfere with. And lots of cardio, particularly an aggressive cardio, can compromise lean muscle mass when you're that lean. And so I might prefer to do 2-a-day workouts over significantly increasing my cardio, and like to separate my cardio by at least 4 hours and possibly alternating days from my lifting in order not to have that compromise. So I know there's no magic involved there. I mean, obviously your sleep has to be on point. Your creatine supplementation is probably pretty important at that point. Your protein intake, your calories are so low and you're trying not to accumulate or get too much. Your fats might be down to 60 grams a day. I don't like to go too much lower than that. It compromises hormones and sleep. And so at some point, you might need to incorporate some protein powders. I know I'm a whole foods guy, but once your calories get so restricted and your fats get so low, in order to get sufficient protein, and you may need a little more protein under that scenario, mostly for satiety benefits and the thermic effect of food. But also, when you're that lean, you want to make sure you're eating at least 4 meals a day to get those frequent protein feeding intervals, so that you're not going too long without protein. There's no mechanism in the body to store protein. So we want to, the ISSN recommends this as well, at least 4 meals a day, particularly as you get leaner and leaner. I don't know if I hit on anything extraordinary there. It's just doubling down
Mhm.
on all the things that got you there to just with a lot more discipline and consistency.
So for somebody who's listening to this, and let's just use the example, like let's just say somebody's looking to go from 15% body fat down to 10% body fat. And I guess in the healthy range, we're speaking to more of the male audience because I believe that 10% as a female is probably a bit
It's
unhealthy, correct?
that, yeah, it's pretty unhealthy.
Right. Um, and so with this same example for a guy looking to go from 15 to 10, let's just say this guy is, just for simplicity, it's 200 pounds, eating 2,000 calories a day, and at 15% body fat. Is the move then just to preserve as much muscle to decrease that 2,000 slowly, like down to 1,900, 1,800, and just see how the body starts to adapt from there?
If necessary. Now, everybody's different. I would like to increase workload at that point.
Mm,
I know calories are king. And when I start someone on a diet, I don't overemphasize energy expenditure. I don't put them on these extraordinary, battle ropes and burpees programs. I just get them to walk more. At least for an initial intervention, calories constitutes about 90% of the weight loss. As you get leaner, I'm reticent to restrict calories too much, as mentioned, because it's going to start to compromise performance and potentially not have sufficient, just calories and protein to feed the muscle tissue. I know you used that as an arbitrary example, but I do have 200-pound guys that sometimes get down to under 2,000 calories. I also have 135-pound girls that eat 2,700 calories. So it's something to consider, that you have to be cautious not to set yourself up for failure by dropping too many calories too soon. And that's often what I see happen. When Flex was preparing me for nationals back in 2009, we started over 6 months out, increasing my calorie intake very gradually and slowly so that I had something to cut from.
mm.
We might look at that as kind of reverse dieting, and is something that people are familiar with now when you come off of a show. But we would do that in the off season, so that when I made a reduction in calories, then I could see a result, a fat loss result. And so, yes, at some point you're going to have to continue to uh, work on one or both ends of the energy balance equation. Your energy intake may need to reduce, and your energy expenditure may need to increase, or a combination thereof. And we have talked about my preferred stimulus in terms of energy expenditure, and we talked about my preferred macro count in terms of energy intake. I usually try and reduce fats first,
Mm.
gradually and slowly, and as I mentioned, all the way down to 60 grams before I'm starting to pull carbs out, because the carbs fuel the training. And remember, as said, the training stimulus is critical for those individuals who are trying to retain their lean mass. I know protein's important, but it's not nearly as important as the training stimulants. We've seen multiple studies now. I think it's out of, I want to say it's Stu Phillips' lab, where he's compared two groups at a significant calorie deficit, one with half the protein of the other, and they had comparable results in retaining lean mass, so long as the training stimulus
Mm.
was sufficient enough. And he noted that the training was hard, and these were monitored training sessions by the in the study, and there were some dropouts, especially in the group who had the lowest calories and the lowest protein, because the training was just so hard. And so that's another cautionary note to people who want to get from 15 to 12 or 12 to 10, or even sub 10% body fat, is that it comes at a sacrifice. You're tired all the time. You're hungry all the time. There's very few people can maintain less than 10% body fat and feel good. That's rarely the case. And if you're a natural athlete, you're going to have a significant decline in testosterone, which can, impact libido and energy, obviously, all those things, and even lean mass loss. It's a very difficult thing to sustain. I would say it's damn near impossible for any extended period of time.
So would you say that a lot of people that maintain that like insane level of physique that you see on like covers of magazines or you see at shows and stuff like that, because I think oftentimes people will look at that and either think that or be like, you know what, like it's not even worth trying because that just seems impossible for me to get there.
Yes, absolutely. In today's Instagram environment, you don't have to compete. If you've got a six pack, that's going to bode well for your audience and your, whatever it is you're selling. It is not a physique that's attainable by the vast majority of the population, and it's certainly not sustainable by the vast majority of the population. And it's not sustained by those individuals unless they're smaller. But by the big guys, they diet down for an extended period of time for one single day on stage, and they don't look the same a week later. Now, Larry Wheels recently competed. He looked phenomenal at the Olympia in the amateur class. And I think he already did a video that 5 days later, he weighed something like 50 pounds heavier in 5 days. I've had extraordinary rebounds myself, where in 4 weeks I would put on 30 or 40 pounds after a show. So it's not something that people sustain for a long period of time. And there's lots of other things going on with the lighting and the editing of the pictures. And that's why in many cases I ask clients, what's your goal? Show me a picture of what it is you'd like to look like. And so I can give them a realistic idea of whether that's even attainable. It can be very difficult. I'd also say this, that there's obviously genetics reign supreme, and there's some people who are relatively lean, and their challenge is actually gaining muscle. And when they do, after many years of hard training, gain some muscle, they tend to stay pretty lean. And also, body fat is taken evenly off the body, but it's not stored evenly. And everybody has their own predisposition for where they tend to, for their troubled spots, whether it be in the abdomen or, wherever they tend to hold their fat. Men or women are generally different. And that will be the last place that the fat comes off. And so you could be very lean on the rest of your body and still be holding some abdominal fat. Uh, and you may have to get down to a point where you're actually losing muscle tissue in order to see, if that's your goal, in order to see a six pack. And that might not be very healthy. That might just be your own genetic predisposition.
But what I found is I just think that that's like every guy's, not every guy, but a lot of guys' goals is to have that those washboard abs and to be able to just have that level of physique. And just given what you've just mentioned, that a lot of this isn't maintainable for a majority of people without sacrificing like your mental health, your family life, your the rest of your life. Where's the happy medium? Because personally, I've been able to maintain a very like lean level of body fat percentage over the last whatever 10 plus years, and I haven't lost my mind. So if I'm just say for the sake of this conversation, I'm coming to you and I'm in a place where I'm trying to get from the 15 to 10% body fat, trying to see my abs. Like what are you telling me is realistic as far as being able to get lean but also having a life still?
Yeah, again, very individualistic. Genetic predispositions are going to kind of determine how easy or how hard that is. You can lose the fat, but you have to be very careful not to lose a bunch of muscle in the process. This
Mm.
happened to, I don't know if you remember Dr. Peter Attia recently talking about all of his extended fasting and his keto dieting. And year over year, his DEXA scan showed that he lost about 12 pounds of muscle, and he's only about a 180-pound guy. So uh, that's the compromise. If you try and too aggressively diet off the fat, you're going to lose a significant amount of muscle tissue. But that's the faster way. That's one of the problems. The faster way to see your abs is to just lose as much fat as possible. The long-term way, in order for, like you said, to be able to maintain a lean physique for an extended period of time, would be to build a lot more muscle. And then you would be able to display a greater level of muscularity just by appearance at the same body fat level, or slightly lower if that's what you were able to achieve. I always tell everybody that when it's an illusion when you see bodybuilders on stage. I think the first Mr. Olympia well, not Mr. Olympia, but the first pro show that Flex Wheeler won, I think he weighed around 217 pounds or something like that. the guys were much, much lighter than people presumed because they were so lean. It gave them the appearance. And so in clothing, a lot of the pro bodybuilders, certainly the men's physique guys, the classic bodybuilders, in clothing, you'll see a 6-foot guy might come in at less than 220. That isn't an awe-inspiring individual as compared to the heavyweight men's open class. But when they peel off their clothes, you'll see a level of definition that just it defies the eye, because they've got all of those really lean muscle tie-ins and the shoulder to waist ratio, and even the elbow to bicep or wrist to forearm ratios that are really attractive, I think, when people are looking at a nice physique, depending on what their goal is. I think most people focus on the classic bodybuilding now as being something they'd like to potentially aspire to, as opposed to the men's open bodybuilding.
And with all that said, I mean, I feel like, you mentioned that genetics play a big part in it, especially when you get down to the last few pounds of body fat. And you often hear people say, like, everybody has abs. There's just a layer of fat covering them that you can't see them. But do you think, I mean, you've worked with a lot of people. Do you think there's just some people that just it's just not possible to see their abs?
I don't know if I would say not possible, but I would say it would not be advisable.
Okay.
And they may suffer all of the things that we discussed in terms of sleep loss and libido and just general fatigue and all of those things, depression, even in an attempt to achieve that. And so I wouldn't think at some point that it would be recommended for some people. Yeah, I think it's a small percentage of people that can maintain visible abdominals year round that aren't just uncomfortable and aren't maybe compromised in terms of their hormones and testosterone
Mm.
in particular. What I found is that most people, when they've achieved that end, first and foremost, it's not an end. It's not a destiny. It's a journey, and I think it was Joe Rogan who said one time that bodybuilding is like building a sandcastle. That it's not something that it's easy to sustain. Once you've achieved that level of fitness, now you have to continue. I say you become a victim of your own circumstance. As
Mm.
bodybuilders become prisoners to this the obligation of I have to get this many hours of sleep. I have to do this much training, and it has to be of this intensity, and I have to have this much protein and this many meals, and I can't go over this many calories. And once any of those areas start to decline in adherence, then you start to see a decline in performance or appearance.
For the person who wants to do this the right way, they don't want to take any kind of performance enhancing drugs. They don't want to lose. I mean, they want to lose the least amount of muscle as possible. They want to be in this for the long run. What I've heard you say is the best things for that person to do is to focus on building muscle, follow a good strength and muscle building program, reduce your caloric intake. I mean, super, super slow to prevent the reduction of muscle. Keep protein high. Start with reducing fats first before the other macronutrients. One of the things I heard a lot when I was, super obsessive with being lean was that fasted cardio, like burned pure body fat. Do you think there's truth to that, or do you believe that's a myth?
Let me hit on that. Let me touch one more thing. I said that reduce fats first, then carbs. When you control for calories and protein, where you put fats and carbs does not matter in terms of weight loss. We have plenty of studies to show that, plenty of long-term trials.
Right.
Um, and so I just want to make sure that people understand that that is my recommendation for performance. That if you cut carbs too fast and too much, that then your training will suffer. That anaerobic stimulus and the need for that glycogen for training will suffer. And then you'll lose strength and lean mass as a result. So that's strictly a performance recommendation, as was the protein feedings 4 times a day by the ASSN. That's for performance again. Now we're on to fasted cardio. Uh, this has undergone many, 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 many studies now. The substrate, the fuel that you use to perform cardio, does not determine whether you lose weight. If you're burning fat during a cardio session, that doesn't mean you're going to lose fat. You could have overconsumed calories for the day, or you could not be in a calorie deficit. And if you burn more fat doing your training, you may burn more carbs later in the day. And if you burn more carbs during your training, you may burn more fat later in the day. The important thing to consider is not what you're utilizing during the training stimulus, but are you experiencing a calorie deficit at the end of the day?
Mm.
And if you are, your body will burn body fat in order to do so. So, no, and they've made many, many studies comparing fasted cardio to fed cardio. And we do not, and although we see different substrate utilization, fats being burned for long intensity, steady state cardio in a fasted state, as opposed to carbohydrates being burned in, say, high intensity interval training. We see the same fat loss if you control for total daily energy intake and expenditure.
So for the person who's listening to this and again is on this theme of wanting to achieve a lean physique, get a six pack the right way, what I'm hearing you say is it doesn't matter when you do cardio. What matters most is that you're in a caloric deficit for that day.
Correct. And I will say this additionally, it doesn't, it's your personal preference whether you choose to do cardio fasted or fed. I would recommend, and the research suggests that your training should be fed. You
Mm,
will get one more rep, 5 more pounds, and the cumulative effect of that over time is that you're going to get a better hypertrophy stimulus. And so I don't encourage training fasted. And these may be small effects uh, acutely, but chronically over time can become a greater and greater difference in terms of your results in retaining or gaining lean mass.
So somebody's got the diet down. They're like, all right, I'm hearing what Stan's saying. I know that I have to not reduce calories drastically, that I have to keep protein high, that I have to, do the workouts the right way. And all the stuff you just shared about fasted cardio and everything else. And they're like, all right, like now I want to actually start to work on my abs in the gym to get them to pop out so that when I'm losing the necessary body fat that you can see them. Do you believe that that is an important component of this is abdominal training specifically?
Yeah, a little bit. And let's distinguish between abdominal training for losing fat because there's no way to burn fat off of a specific location. And it's also not the most economically effective way to burn fat, right? A
Right,
sit up is
right.
not as effective as training in general or cardio. And so spot reduction in any reasonable fashion does not exist. There are some
Mm,
studies demonstrating uh, modest spot reduction under protocols that I don't think are achievable. But yes, if you, it kind of depends also. Everybody has their own kind of strengths and weaknesses in terms of what muscles respond to training. Some people have great chests, some people have great triceps, some people have great shoulders. All of them benching, they don't get equivalent outcomes from that exercise. So that's very
mm,
individualistic. And some people have, rather blocky, pronounced abdominals, and others do not. And so
right.
and abdominal muscles are like any other muscle in the body, although they might recover a little bit faster than, say, your quads or your back or chest, because it's a smaller muscle group, at least individually. And so you can train them just like, twice a week. Range of motion matters, sets and reps matters, loads matter, intensity matters, all the same things that apply to building muscles, any other muscle in the body. You'd want to use those evidence-based hypertrophy guidelines to build the abdominal muscles. And so just some curl ups, whether hanging from a bar or off the edge of an incline bench, um, would be, you want to get them through a full range of motion, through stretch, and then contract them.
As far as maintaining sanity throughout this process, you've talked about how stressful it can be given that you have to go from now being adherent 80% of the time to now like being adherent 90, 95, 98% of the time. And I can imagine for the person that isn't like a seasoned bodybuilder or physique competitor, it's going to impact them mentally and emotionally in a way that maybe they're not used to. And then also we know that if you're more stressed, if your sleep is off and all those things, that's going to impact your ability to burn body fat too. What's worked for you in the past, whether with you personally or with the people that you've trained, where they're in that phase of, you know, exerting more energy, reducing calories, and trying to lose body fat? Like, what's helped, like, kind of maintain the sanity?
Well, the biggest thing is to have good time management and to make all of these, as I mentioned before, obligations easier to adhere to.
Mm,
If you have to go in and start from scratch and cook a separate meal 4 or 5 times a day, that's going to take away from other things, whether it's work or family or free time. And so maybe at that point, you're going to have to employ, and probably long before that, you should have employed some meal prep, whether you use a meal prep company or whether you have a system in place where you prep all of your meals and have them, ready and you can travel with them. I've been in 14 countries in all 50 states. I've done 200 seminars or more in the last 5 years. And I always travel with my meals. And people always ask me, oh, isn't that traveling hard? And I'm like, as long as I have a thermos full of hot food and my iPhone, I'm actually really relaxed. And when I go someplace for an extended period of time, I take a rolling Coleman cooler with 20 frozen meals in it, and I stay someplace that has a kitchenette. And so these things are super simple for me. If I'm flying to the East Coast, I'll take 2 meals in my hot thermos, 2 hot meals in my thermos. And now I'm eating on my schedule, but I'm also eating the meals that I like to eat, that I'm supposed to eat with the right calories and macros that feels good on me. And that's important for people who travel. It's also important for people who don't travel, police, fire, and ambulance. Real estate agents, working out of the trunk of their car on a busy schedule, dropping their kids off at school and picking them up and taking them to, dance or gymnastics or whatever it is after school. That can be a very difficult schedule under which to continue to progress and attempt to achieve a very high level of fitness that might be your goal. But if you can mitigate some of the things that are distractions, which oftentimes is food, the kids want to go to Subway, you have to have an alternative available. And so I would say meal prepping would be the big thing. Also, in terms of cardio, I'm a big fan of the 10-minute walks. I find that the barriers to entry for getting in your car, driving to the gym, getting on a treadmill, and then coming home, it lengthens the commitment, and it's also too easy then to postpone or just to be preoccupied or for it not to be prioritized. And so I just get up in the morning, take a 10-minute walk as soon as you wake up. And then after a couple of meals daily, just take a brisk 10-minute walk. And that will accumulate your 30, 40 minutes worth of cardio a day. And then the training stimulus is the next most important thing. And sometimes you may have to have just a few pieces of weight training equipment available in your garage if you've got a family and a busy time schedule, and you can only get to the gym, on a more limited schedule. When I get people who work long hours, I might put a full body workout on Wednesday night, and then on Saturday and Sunday we'll go hard. We'll do an AM PM.
mm,
They could do their quads in the morning, hamstrings at night, and the next morning they could do their chest. The next night they could do back, and so it's really, I designed the training program to be most easily adhered to. People always want to know what's the best split, and my answer is the one that you'll consistently do, because there really is no difference. Is, do I get my 4 or 5 lifting sessions in a week, which we're talking now about advanced people trying to reach that extreme level of condition, and I think you're going to need 4 or 5 serious training sessions during the week in order to accomplish that. And if you can and also, sometimes we superset those. We're going to do a chest exercise, rest a minute, do a back exercise, rest a minute. And we'll go back and forth and superset those. And we may only do 6 super hard sets for a particular body part rather than the 16 that you see a typical bodybuilder attempt. I think the literature suggests now that anything north of 6 very intense sets has dramatically diminishing returns. And so if we're talking about a busy individual, let's leverage that and let's work on intensity rather than volume and duration. I always say you can train long or you can train hard, but you can't do both. And so
mm,
those things become critical. And then just little things around the house that may take you time. You just have to be a little more efficient. Maybe you got to get a cleaning lady, or something to afford you more time to continue to do your training and have time for your kids and your family. But everything has to become more efficient, and your time management has to improve. And I operate on this very pretty regimented schedule, but I have to make everything take less time and just have less. I guess we call it friction.
Mm.
When we talk about ways to be more effective, you have to get rid of a lot of the friction, the things that tend to interfere with your ability to accomplish your goals.
Do you think it ever gets easier to where if somebody achieves this goal that we're talking about, and then now they're able to just maintain it, do you think that a lot of it will just become second nature over time? They don't have to put in as much work to pay attention to certain things, given that they've kind of achieved this thing and they've got a rhythm or a routine that reflects that?
100%, and on two different levels. One level, after you've achieved the weight loss with the calorie deficit, you do get to reintroduce those calories for maintenance. If you're no longer interested in losing weight, then you get to add back in that 300 to 500 calories that you were in a deficit, or possibly reduce a little bit of the cardio, and you'll be able to sustain that new weight, presuming it's not so aggressive that your body's trying to go back to some set point. I've always said it's twice as hard to gain, half as hard to maintain. Uh, and by that, I mean you do get a few more calories. Uh, you probably can train one day less if you've earned the muscle and you continue to invest the same level of intensity. You might be able to do fewer total workouts a week to maintain. And on another note, a lot of those behaviors start to become habits. All the time management skills that you've developed in terms of meal prepping, or maybe you've started using a meal prep company, like the 10-minute walks. Those things start to become habits, and you just do them as a matter of course, and they don't take up a whole lot of brain power, so that you're not don't seem as fatigued at the end of the day from obliging yourself to all these things that used to be kind of a big burden to know. And I just keep a little checklist and make sure I'm setting myself up for success by uh, what I ask all same thing I ask all my clients to do. I tell them to send me their hours of sleep, their morning weight, and a picture of each meal daily. That's what I want to see. And then I also like to see their PRs at the gym. That's kind of how I measure progress over time. And that can be on any of a number of different lifts, but I want them to go to the gym and add 5 pounds or one rep to whatever exercise and whatever volume that they are performing, whether it's 5 reps, 12 reps, or 20 reps, depending on what they prefer and whatever exercise they're utilizing. I want them to stick with it and progress it over time so that we know we're making progress.
I mean, I know a lot of what we've talked about is that what we're speaking about isn't for everybody, and that you really have to be super dedicated and making sure that you're wanting to achieve this goal for the right reasons. You have to pay attention to calories. You got to pay attention to your training program. You got to pay attention to sleep. All that we've covered. Anything else that you think people should really pay attention to? If guys listening to this, it's like, you know what, I want to make sure that I do this right. I want to make sure that I'm in this for the long run. I don't want this to become this super obsessive thing. Like, is there anything that this person should also know?
You know, lastly, I would say that if you feel like all the time, that you may just be accumulating more fatigue than is necessary. I did this to myself many times throughout my career, and I think those people who have attempted to train super, super hard realize that for a day or two or three after, you're suffering from such a high amount of DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, uh, and and just brain fog sometimes from heavy deadlifts and things like that. That you might have to reevaluate uh, how you're training and train a little smarter, not harder, in terms of the stimulus to fatigue ratio. And as I've aged, I'm 56 now. I can't accumulate the same amount of fatigue that I used to, or I feel terrible. And so I do more concentric movements, less eccentric. And that might mean I'll do a box squat instead of a regular squat. So I don't have to reverse the weight and endure some extra muscle damage. I might do chest supported rows instead of a bent row. And it just pulls less on my lumbar spine. I don't have to load it as heavy. I might deadlift less often. I might use other exercises that I feel transfer over to that. I might disadvantage myself on an exercise such that I can't lift as much weight. example of that might be a single leg movement, Bulgarian split squat or a lunge. You can get an equivalent hypertrophy from a Bulgarian split squat as you can from a regular squat, but you'd be using a third the weight. And it's the gross load that seems to matter the most in terms of its impact on what we used to presume was central nervous system fatigue, but it's just fatigue. Overall, the heavier weights are going to cause more fatigue. So maybe you put yourself into a high bar or a front squat with an angle plate to get more knee range of motion, which would give you more quad work. But now your weight's going to get cut in half. You're not going to be able to do 500 pounds anymore. You're only going to be able to do 2.25. Because the range of motion is greater, and that's going to provide a better stimulus. So I do lots of sled work, which is all concentric. I do plenty of cardio swimming or on an assault bike. I would suggest that lots and lots of running would have a similar fatigue, high fatigue, because it's that landing, repetitive braking force, the eccentric deceleration braking force over and over and over and over again, depending on the weight of your body. I'm not saying it's bad for you, but I'm saying you have to be cautious how much fatigue you accumulate. And it all goes into the same bucket, whether it's your running for cardio as opposed to swimming, or whether it's a heavy squat as opposed to a lighter front squat. So you got to kind of look at every exercise you're doing and analyze it in terms of what's my return on this investment, what's my stimulus versus my fatigue that I'm going to walk out of the gym with, because it's really unnecessary to do a ton of muscle damage. I think we've learned now, and you're certainly up on the research, as Brad Schoenfeld. Even the scientists have evolved. 10 years ago, we thought that there was a kind of a combination of three things from that led to hypertrophy. Mechanical tension is one, metabolic stress is another, and muscular damage. We used to think all three of those things contributed to hypertrophy, and now it appears that metabolic stress and muscular damage are just passengers, and the driver of hypertrophy is mechanical tension. And so you can try and reduce the fatigue. You don't have to have a whole lot of. We used to think that in the eccentric portion of the movement, you would get more muscle damage, more microfibril tearing is what we presumed was happening. And in fact, that's not necessary for growth.
Hmm.
And so those long, slow, heavy eccentrics, and I'm not talking about things that might benefit, say, a power lifter in a small sense. I'm just talking about for the general population that it's probably unnecessary to do these 20-second negatives or forced negatives or overloaded, negatives, because you're gonna create a lot of DOMs. You can create a lot of DOMs by playing pickleball with your neighbor. You're not going to
Right.
build a lot of muscle doing that, And so be cautious that the stimulus is giving you the result that you want, and you're not just in there doing battle ropes and burpees because you breathe hard and sweat a lot. And that's not a good stimulus for hypertrophy. So I'd be cautious how much energy you invest into what exercises and what return you're getting from those, so that you don't, I think, overexert yourself.
But as far as like somebody who is, feeling a little fatigued because they've reduced their caloric intake and maybe they've increased their energy expenditure, maybe they've increased their steps or what have you, and they're looking to still, build muscle and strength and lift heavier, but also in a way that they're not going to hurt themselves and be safe. Do you find that it's useful for people to do like a lighter weight and focus on maybe like on a 3 to 5 second negative instead of like a 1 to 2 second negative?
I don't think there's any difference between the 2 second negative and the 5 second negative. We've
Got
researched
it.
that. And as far as the load goes, whether it's a 5 rep set, a 12 rep set, or a 20 rep set, with, the 5 rep set would be 85% of your 1 rep max, the 12 rep set would be 70%, and the 20 rep set would be 50% of your 1 rep max. We see equivalent hypertrophy outcome. We do see greater fatigue with the heavier loads. We also see greater strength. This is kind of what's your goal. And so that's kind of why, I think oftentimes I hear Schoenfeld said that the bros were right. The bodybuilders trained a lot in that middle rep range because they would get more fatigue on either end. But that didn't mean they wouldn't include some heavy fives and finish with an AMRAP because you want to stimulate all the muscle fibers. But they spent the bulk of their volume in that middle range. It's actually kind of ancillary to that, but it has to do with hydration. Oftentimes you see people, it's particularly pronounced when people start like a keto or a carnivore diet and they end up losing the glycogen from their muscles, and that's 70% water and sodium. And so they'll get the keto flu, we referred to it as, but it's just fatigue from electrolyte deficiency. And so hydration becomes important. That can help you with, say, hunger between meals. It can help you with your stamina and endurance in training, particularly if you're dehydrated from fewer calories, fewer carbohydrates, just less overall blood volume of water. And so, we want people to implement a hydration protocol that includes some sodium, and the best way to transport that into the system is also to have a little bit of carbohydrate. And so we encourage them to get the right concentration of fluid. And then for about an hour before they train, they like to sip on that. And then throughout training, sip on that. And they may find that they'll have significantly more energy for training by doing that. Now, the concentration is important. I'm not talking about if you take too much just water, you'll pee a lot. If you take too much sugar, like in a lot of the Gatorades and those kinds of things are generally north of 8% glucose, you'll pee a lot. If you take in too much salt, you'll pee a lot. And so the idea is to have the right concentration. And that concentration, let's just give an example. It's about 1% sodium and about 3% glycogen. So say for a gallon of water, let's put in 1,000 milligrams of sodium. That's one LMNT. Or 2 liquid IVs. And just look for whatever is 1,000 milligrams of sodium. Add it to a gallon of water, and then add in about 80 grams of carbohydrates. Could be dextrose, glucose, sucrose. It doesn't matter. And then sip on that. And I'm not suggesting you drink the whole gallon. I'm just offering up an easy way for you to titrate the concentrate, or to blend the concentration. Gallon of water, 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 60 to 80 grams of sugar. That would be the concentration that would most easily be absorbed from the small intestine into the bloodstream and increase your blood volume so that you're hydrated throughout training and give you the energy and stamina. Now, it's not intended to replace all the sodium that you lose during training, and it's not intended to replace all the glycogen that you lose during training. You can get that from your food later, or if you're training twice a day and you're an athlete and maybe you need a more substantial protocol for post-workout. But for pre and intra, that's the recommended concentration. And you don't need to drink all of it. You can have a liter, but just sip on it starting about an hour before and throughout training. And if it tastes good and it's cold, you'll likely drink a little more. You'll feel better. That'll help give you energy for training, so you don't necessarily have to rely on stimulants all the time. And a lot of people, when they get down to that level of body fat and they get tired, now they start pounding caffeine like crazy, and that
Yeah.
can have its own adverse effects. So yeah, and I'm not saying that coffee's bad for you or caffeine's bad for you necessarily. It could be a performance enhancer, but it becomes less and less. As you know, you attenuate to it over time, so the effects don't feel as good. And then if you go without it for a short period of time, next thing you know, you've got headaches and you have those kind of withdrawal symptoms.
You've talked about how when you want to get to that next level of leanness and lose the belly fat and get a six pack, you have to be really dialed in with
Yeah.
nutrition. And I know your approach on nutrition is very nuanced depending on the individual, depending on the goals. I get that, right? But for the sake of this conversation, you've mentioned you got to be dialed in. So, like, what do you think are within the context of what we're talking about, where you got to get your protein, your carbs, your fat, you got to get your calories right? What do you think are the best foods, broadly speaking, for somebody to incorporate into their diet to lose the belly fat and to get the six pack if they want?
Yeah, calories are king. In terms of macros, protein is the most important. You want to get about a gram of protein per pound of body weight. Now we're talking about a very lean individual trying to get even leaner. A gram of protein per pound of body weight. General
Mm,
population, gram of protein per pound of goal weight or lean weight.
got
But for
it.
these individuals, let's go for pound of body weight. Uh, Fats, I mentioned, I don't like to get those below 60 grams, and the rest would be carbs, and that would be calculated based on once you subtracted your protein for body weight and your fats at 60 grams. And fats don't have to start at 60. I'm just saying that would be someplace we could reduce them. I usually do fats at about half the protein. If I'm eating 200 grams of protein, I can have 100 grams of fats. But as I'm starting to diet, I might start knocking those fats down to 90 grams, 80 grams, 70 grams, very slowly. The rest would be carbs.
Mm,
And that would just depend on what your total caloric burn was for the day. That would be different for different individuals. Somebody training twice a day with a huge muscle mass, might have to eat 3,500 calories, and someone else, like you mentioned earlier, might be in the 2,000 calorie range. So what comes next is twofold. I think one is satiety, which means you're going to want to use mostly whole unprocessed foods. And there are some foods that are higher on the satiety index. Protein is one, fibers are another. Boiled potatoes, oranges, those are very high on the satiety index. Those are things that keep you full. And one of the reasons I like boiled potatoes and oranges in that regard is because they're also high in potassium. And that takes us down to our next consideration, which is micronutrients. And this is why I promote a very diverse diet. I don't like to get just one source of protein. I don't like too many protein shakes. I like to keep red meat in the diet, especially for women, for iron and B12 and zinc. It's loaded with those. I like to keep an egg yolk in there. I want choline and biotin. I want to get some fish in there, some salmon. We've got obviously omega-3s. I want to get plenty of dairy in there, and preferably probably yogurt. Just the benefits of fermented foods. Probiotics on the gut microbiome are extraordinary. To get your 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day. I mentioned potassium next. That would be your potatoes, fruits, yogurt, all of those. Your meats all have 100 milligrams of potassium per ounce. So you can see how I'm starting to go down through the micronutrients and make sure that the foods that we're selecting, the fruits and vegetables that follow the variety of protein sources, fulfill all of our micronutrient needs. So satiety and micronutrients are the next consideration after calories and protein.
So I think one of the other things that can tend to happen, at least in my own experience, is when I'm really trying to be dialed in, and if I eat like stuff that's been processed, or if go out to eat and I eat chicken that's been cooked in a bunch of oil or has a lot of salt in it, what I've noticed is I've become, even though I haven't eaten necessarily quote unquote more calories than I need for that day, I'll notice myself being like bloated and feeling more full, where I'm not able to see my abs like I did maybe like when I woke up in the morning. So talk a bit about the importance of really paying attention to that, so that you are not eating in a way where you would feel or look bloated.
Yeah, you're going to get some bloating, whether or not it becomes uncomfortable or turns into distension or pain, such as in the IBS situation. That could be very individualistic. A lot of those problems that the athletes that I work with have put themselves into that position over the years by being too restrictive. And so at some point, uh, individuals need to determine what foods they react to that way and in what quantities. Very individualistic, very dose dependent. How they're prepared matters, and it can be cumulative in nature. Some people can handle a half a cup of oatmeal on Monday and Tuesday, but by Wednesday, after they've eaten their third half a cup of oatmeal, they might start bloating. And you'd presume to think that that oatmeal wasn't the problem. I'm not demonizing oatmeal. I'm just giving you an example of one type of problem that people have with cumulative foods, is that by day three, all of a sudden you feel bloated, and you wouldn't attribute it to the oatmeal because you wouldn't have accounted for the fact that you've been accumulating that over a course of a number of days. And that also is very dependent on your personal microbiome and whether or not you have the bacteria necessary to uh, break down those foods in what quantities that you eat them. Another example of cumulative in nature would be sugar alcohols, sorbitol, mannitol, xylitol, those kinds of things that are used as sweeteners in a lot of foods. They cause diarrhea, and it's dose dependent as well. And so if you're trying to reduce your total caloric intake by reducing your sugar, and you see that the things you're eating are full of sugar alcohols, it might be a double-edged sword. And so you got to be cautious. That's why I tend towards whole foods without demonizing sweeteners, just simply because you expose yourself to fewer ingredients that may react either acutely or with dose accumulation over time. So I do get people that have IBS. Obviously, if you're in that situation, you're going to have to employ what's referred to as an elimination diet. This is what your gastroenterologist would recommend to you. And the most successful intervention for IBS, the one that's most studied and provides the most relief, has been the FODMAP diet,
Mm.
FODMAP, fermentable oligodimmonosaccharides and polyols. That's out of Monash University in Australia, and they've studied that to show that 60 to 80% of people who consume the low FODMAP diet can experience a significant relief in IBS symptoms. It's not for everyone, and the intention is that you experience some relief from those symptoms, and then reintroduce foods gradually over time to find out which ones are less tolerable to you. And again, it's individualistic, it's dose dependent, and how they're prepared matters. Some people might be lactose intolerant, and that is a dose dependent. That's not any lactose. It could be the quantity or type. And if you started titrating it slowly and gradually over time, 1 ounce, 2 ounces, 3 ounces, your lactase enzyme may upregulate, in which case you'd be allowed to, your body would afford you the opportunity to consume greater amounts of it as you became more able to with the enzyme upregulation. So there's plenty of examples like that, but generally speaking, some people are going to have to keep a pretty good log of when they have those kinds of problems of the foods that they eat. And again, some bloating is normal and not, some gas is normal. It shouldn't be considered any sort of pathology to avoid. I just watch the degree to which that happens. And you probably hit on a more important point, and that was that those ultra processed, highly palatable foods just don't satiate you, and you end up going over your calorie count for the day.
How does somebody know if they're holding on to water weight? Because you hear that a lot too. Like if somebody eats a lot of salty foods, that they wake up the next day and they may appear they've gained more weight than they actually have.
Yeah, I mean the scale could touch on that if you remembered what you ate the previous day. Like you said, sodium can happen. Hey, a hard leg day can cause you to store a little more water the next day. Salt is usually can be a big contributor to that, particularly if it's significantly higher than what you're normally consuming. Your body takes a little while to adapt to changes in just about anything in the fiber level, in the water level of the foods that you eat. I mean, if you go from 12 grams of fiber a day to 40 grams of fiber a day, you're going to have some significant changes in your
Mm.
bowel movements, and that might be very uncomfortable. That doesn't mean the fiber's bad. It just means it's too much too soon. And, you're going to have to probably progress that at a dose that you can handle. But you may see some of the edema. You may feel some of it, whether it's in your feet to your ankles or what have you. One of the best protocols for that is just make sure you're getting sufficient potassium, because that works to help balance the water, and then continue to consume water the next day. Don't fall into the trap of thinking you should avoid water. Actually, when you drink water, it helps uh, with that retention problem. So potassium's a big one, 4,700 milligrams a day. Usually that's potato, fruit, and yogurt, and your meats. You might throw spinach in there too. It's high in potassium. But that would help you with that, regulating that water balance.
So staying on this theme of nutrition, one of the um, roadblocks you'll hear people say they run into when it comes to trying to achieve something like this is, well, my diet's going to be super bland. It's going to taste like crap. And I think there is going to be some adjustment to that where you're not going to be able to eat as many hyperpalatable foods as maybe you were before. What have you found that's been helpful in making these foods that you're talking about not taste like crap to somebody who's maybe not used to overhauling their diet in the way that we're talking about?
Yeah, that may take a little bit of, like if you're trying to reduce sugar, you might just start gradually cutting down on the total amount, whether you put that in your coffee or what have you. Using a leaner meat is why people enjoy red meat, but the
Mm,
75-25 beef at a fast food place is probably not a good choice.
right.
Uh, both for the saturated fat content, which can elevate LDLs, but also just because of its high calorie content. And so maybe you go to a top sirloin steak, and then maybe you find I use the Ninja Grill to prep those, and because they can be uh, pretty dry or pretty tough, depending on how you prepare them. So you do have to find ways to prepare your food so it still tastes good. And then replacing some of those snack items at night, replacing the ice cream, maybe even initially replacing it with, say, fat-free Greek yogurt and berries would be something you could probably eat a lot of and not accumulate a ton of calories. Or get one of those ice cream machines and just make your own that has a lot less sugar and fat in it. So you'll have to find a way to replace your favorite foods with those that are less calorically dense, so you can still have those snacks and treats. Um, and then egg white blend as opposed to just going straight from eggs to egg whites, which I'm not a big proponent of just egg whites anyhow, because I want to keep that yolk in there. It's all the vitamins in it. Maybe you go with a blend there. Uh, Salt as opposed to butter, oils, butters, things like that, or I refer to them kind of as hidden calories. When you go to a restaurant and they cook your flat iron steak in a pool of cottonseed oil, that's going to dramatically add calories to your plate. And then the same thing would be true of the dressing on your salad. Maybe you get that on the side. So small choices like that, where you can still have a fork dipped in your dressing as opposed to having it bathed in a pool of oil. Uh, those are hidden calories that people often don't recognize. Those little dips I'll use this as a terrible example, but I've had many high school and collegiate athletes over the years who who aren't able to prep their meals, and they travel with the teams, etc. And they end up at fast food places. And so I have to Google the menus and tell them, here's the ideal choices at those places. Here's where you can get your higher protein, your lower fat, and have a good meal. Obviously, you stay away from the sugar sodas, and probably a good idea to stay away from the chips and even the fries. Focus on the lean protein sources, which generally is going to be chicken. But additionally, those dips, the nuggets that are dipped in those little sauce cups, some of those sauce cups could be 300 calories. That little tiny cup. And that's because there's a ton of oil in some of those, and you have to try and avoid. And it's not a good food, bad food conversation. I'm not trying to demonize oils at this point. It's a completely different conversation. But deep fried foods would be another example. Almost anything you submerge in that vat of oil is going to come with an enormous amount of calories that could be avoided if you did it in the absence of deep frying. So those are some examples. I don't know if I solved everybody's taste problems, but I would say that the Ninja Grill is an extraordinary way to cook foods, whether it's lean steaks or salmons, that they still taste excellent. And another trick of mine is to add bone broth. I'll to my rice or to my peppers. I'll cook them in bone broth instead of oil. I'll put them in with my food, use bone broth with my food to kind of make it more moist. So anytime an opportunity like that presents itself, like a chicken stock, those are generally very low in calories, and those help the foods taste good. And then I like to put a little bit of orange juice in with yogurt and some ice water, maybe just as a vehicle to consume more yogurt, because it's very low in calories and very high in protein, and again, very good for digestion. I'm not talking about a lot of orange juice, just a few ounces, just to make the yogurt OJ shake. The kids
Mhm.
love it too. It tastes like an orange creamsicle if you use ice water with it and stir it up. So those are some strategies that I use to make food taste good for my clients.
So would you say eating out is pretty much like, off the table when it comes to somebody who's trying to achieve this? I mean, I know you talked about how restaurants cook their food and there's a lot of hidden calories. I mean, is somebody able to still go out regularly and enjoy a nice meal with their family, their husband, with their family, with somebody that they're, in a relationship with, married to, or whatever? And if so, like, how can somebody order?
Well, there's a very big difference between a grilled, flame grilled steak and a fettuccine Alfredo. We know
Yeah.
that just in terms of
Right.
calories.
Right. Yeah.
And so ideally, you'll Google the menu and look at the calories, and you could stop there and just make sure that you're not eating an extraordinary number. I mean, I think the fettuccine Alfredo at Cheesecake Factory is like 2,500 calories or 27. It's just I mean, it's insane. And if you grill a top sirloin steak at home and put a little salt on it in your Ninja Grill, it's about 320 calories. The same top sirloin steak at Ruth Chris with a cube of butter melted on top of it is 1,800 calories. So you're probably going to have to ask for it without butter and oil on it, and flame grilled if possible. I think salads and meats are always good. If you're going to get the potato, then you're going to want to make the all the stuff on the side, the cheese and sour cream and the like, and be cautious of the deep fried foods, and obviously loading up on bread and butter. If you can have some bread without the butter, that would be ideal. And we encourage folks to drink plenty of fluids, not alcohol, uh, before the meal comes, because it'll help satiate you. And that could be a diet soda or an iced tea or both. It doesn't matter. Then you might not be uh, as interested in ordering an appetizer, let's say. almost all of those are deep fried in most cases, unless it's ceviche or something like that. Um, and then any salad with meat, just make sure the dressing's on the side, and be cautious how much of those Cobb salads with the bacon and blue cheese that that
They're
might be
so
one
good.
you might want to limit. Uh, and then if they put the dressing on the side, and then you get a protein source with that, whether it be a salmon, chicken, or steak, that's a pretty reasonable dinner. And then if you're out with your family and you want to have a dessert, then share one, and try and make it have berries as opposed to something that might be more calorie dense. And those are some options. Those are choices that will have to be made on an ongoing basis. And I've found that I kind of have this principle. I've always had a bit of a sensitive stomach. I've found that I've always said that I eat foods that I like, uh, not or I eat foods that like me, not foods that I like, and I make that choice about an hour after I eat. And so, if you start recognizing how certain foods make you feel, maybe you can eat for that feeling. And I generally walk away from a table feeling pretty good. I don't feel tired, or I don't feel like I have to run to the bathroom. And I enjoy that. My stomach stays flat, a lot. I don't feel gassy and bloated. And if foods make me feel that way, I avoid them in the future. And it doesn't take long. I think most of us know what those foods are. And it's just a matter of finding alternatives.
I'm curious. We touched on the importance of also training your abs in the gym and also training the other muscle groups when you're on this quest to get the six pack. We've talked about nutrition, obviously, very much in depth throughout this conversation. What are your favorite ab exercises for a client who's looking to build that full, you know, six pack, but also have like the obliques and make sure that their core isn't just there for aesthetics, but it's fully functional as well?
Yeah, I like squats and deadlifts for the core. I like weighted carries. I like suitcase carries. I like, major exercises that work the whole core. And then if you're just talking about abdominal work, maybe a rollout on an ab wheel and a curl up, whether it's hanging or hanging from a suspended from a bar, or in one of those curl up machines that your forearms are locked in, and you just kind of lift your knees up and curl your hips up. That'll hit your abdominals pretty well, and that might be it. And I would only do maybe two sets of two different exercises twice a week that would be specific to abdominals. I really don't spend a whole lot of time focusing on those.
Stan, this has been awesome. I think that people are going to really enjoy this conversation. I think we've given them a nice blueprint for the guy that wants to get that six pack, that wants to lose the belly fat and drop the last few pounds and reduce their body fat percentage, a few percentage points. I want to thank you again for coming on. If people want to connect with you, if they haven't already, where's the best place to do that?
Everything's under Stan Efferding. StanEfferding.com is my website. That's where I have my vertical diet ebook, and I do own a nationwide meal prep company where I ship meals all over the country. At Stan Efferding's the Instagram, and Stan Efferding on YouTube. You'll find it all there.
Amazing, my friend. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show. People are going to get a ton of value out of this. And once again, thanks, man.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, I really think you're going to like this video as well. I'll see you there.